to. So I'm just going to save this here on this USB stick here, but you can save it onto your computer and just click the save button there. Oh, and it does not like that USB stick. Okay, here we go. Good. Now we have here the standard interface when you start a new project in QUIRKOS. At the moment, the project is blank. There's nothing in here. But you should see that the screen is split into 2 levels. So on the left side of the screen, we have what we call the canvas area in QUIRKOS. And this is where we keep the themes and the codes, the quirks, the bubbles that we want to explore the data with. On the right side of the screen, this column here, this is where we display the text data. And this is something which we can alter. We can alter the width of here by clicking and dragging this. So for your benefit, I'm going to make that column a little bit wider so we can see everything that's going on there. So those are the 2 basic parts of the screen. Along the top of the screen here, you'll see the buttons which you can use. We'll go through each of these in a minute. And on the right side of the screen, there are a series of buttons and controls which are for the different sources. So these are the documents, the transcripts, or whatever source of text that you wanted to bring into QUIRKOS. Probably the first thing that you'll do is start to bring in some sources of data. So that's what we're going to start on now. And that will allow me to show you around the software a lot more. So you'll see at the very top here, there's a button which says click to add source, and a little arrow pointing to this button on the top right, a plus button in a document icon. And that's where we can add a source of data. And if I click on that, I hope this is still showing in the Zoom capture. There's a great, thanks. There's a menu here which shows we can create a blank source. So we can create an empty source with no data in it, and we can edit and copy and paste in there. There's an option here to select files. So we can select the files on our computer that we want to import. That's the one we're going to use in a minute. There's also the option here to import source from a clipboard. Just show you that very quickly because it is useful. And what that means is if you don't have a file, but you have some text here. So for example, here's some text which we've taken from a web page, but this might be from Twitter or a Facebook post. We can copy that with Control-C or Apple-C on Mac. We can bring that straight into QUIRKOS with this option here. So if we now choose import source from clipboard, shows us a preview here. So this is the text that we selected from QUIRKOS website. It's not very exciting. We'll choose import. And there, we've taken in that text. So if you're bringing in data from an online source, this is a very quick way to do it. Or if you've got data in a format that QUIRKOS doesn't support, you can bring it in that way as well. So now we've brought in one source of text. I'm just going to change the text size a little because I think it'll make it a bit easier for you to see in the stream. So you'll see the button here for settings. I'm going to click on the settings button, choose general project preferences, first option there. And then you've got a series of options to customize how QUIRKOS works and how it looks. Now the first 3 are about the interface. So this one here is the size of the text. So I'm going to make that quite a lot bigger so you can see it. You've also got sliders here to change width of the highlight column, which I'll show you in a minute, and also the memo column, which again I'm going to show you in a minute as well. There's also the option here for the light theme. So I'll show you what that looks like. So by default, QUIRKOS has this dark background, but there's also the option here to switch it for a more standard kind of white background. So I know a lot of computers now, people like to work with a dark mode. It's easier on the eyes for long periods of time staring at the screen. So you've got the option here in settings and general project preferences to switch between those two. I kind of like the dark mode, so I'm going to keep it on that for now. And hopefully you can now see the text on the right side of the screen. Now, above this text source that we've brought in, you'll see that there are 2 tabs. The first tab here with the 3 lines here, that's the text. That's what we're looking at right now. That tab is highlighted. There's another tab here, which is for the source properties. And as I described before, the source properties are for the different ways that we want to describe the source. So this may be something like age or gender, or if it's a journal article, the year or when it was created, or the authors. Now there's also, so we can switch between those at any time. There's also this list here next to the tab at the very top. And this is the list of all the sources in the project. That's this button here, which has got the lines and the dots. I'm not quite sure if you can see that on the stream. But you can see here, we've only got the one source in here. It's called source 1. But we can search for here, and soon we'll have a list of a lot more sources. But actually, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to remove this source. So you'll see next to this one here, there's a little X here. This is kind of just an example I wanted to show you of copy and pasting some data, but it's not actually relevant to the project we're going to look at. So I'm going to click on the X here. And it says, are you sure you want to remove that source? We'll say yes. And now our project is empty again. So at any time you could remove the sources from the project file. Now it may be that you will change your mind about that. So there's undo and redo buttons here. So the two undo and redo buttons here are super useful for changing your mind about something. If you do something by accident, you can now undo and redo any of the actions in QUIRKOS. So now we're going to talk about this example project that I'm going to go through with you today. Basically, we've got a research project which is talking about smartphone addiction. So people are talking about how they view smartphones, how they use smartphones. And what we want to look at today is how smartphones are disrupting family life and if they're changing how children and parents are interacting with each other. So what we've got here is we've actually got 3 transcripts of semi-structured interviews, and we've also got a journal article which is about this. It's a real journal article, and we're going to show you how you can bring all these sources together in a QUIRKOS project. So I'm going to use the click to add source button here at the top right here. Click on the plus button, and then we're going to choose a different option here. So we used the import source from Clipboard before. The other options here are to import from a CSV file, to import from spreadsheet, from Word. You also bring in an entire folder of sources at once. So if you have lots of transcripts in one folder, you just select that folder and bring in all the sources at once. But I'm going to choose the select files option here. And this pops up with the standard dialog again. I'm going to go to the smartphone project folder. And this is where I'm keeping my transcripts. So here I've got 3 transcripts. They're Word files for Chris, Lynn, and Simon. And another option here, which is smartphone article. So that's the PDF of the article, which is about smartphone addiction. And I'm going to select all of these. So Chris, Lynn, and Simon's transcripts and the PDF, and click open. And what it's going to do is import all of those sources of data. There we go, 4 sources have been successfully imported, and they're now copied into the project. You'll see they're loading right there. So here we have this one here. This is the smartphone article. So it's got the title of the article here. It's from the journal, the Qualitative Report, Parents' Perceptions of Smartphone Use and Parenting Practices. Great. And you can see we've got the whole text of the PDF here. So it's quite a long article. But what that means is we can, in a minute, go through and code that. We also see along the top here, we now have some tabs have appeared. And what these tabs do is these allow you to move between the different sources that you have in the project. So if we click on the Simon's tab, you'll see, so what do you use your phone for? So this is the interview with Simon. So this is a very short extract, actually, of a transcribed semi-structured interview. And Simon is actually the child in the project. There's another tab here, and that's for Chris. And this is a section of an interview with Chris. So he's the father of the family. He's been interviewed as well, and his transcript is here. But there's actually another source here. So QUIRKOS only shows 3 tabs at a time, and they're the 3 most recently used tabs. So the sources that the last 3 sources that you were looking at, basically. But if you remember, we've got this button here at the top left, which shows you a list of all the sources in the project file. And you'll see we also have one here for Lynn. So if we click on Lynn, that will load Lynn's tab as well. And then we've got Lynn's interview here at the same time. So by moving between these tabs, we can go between the different sources that we've worked with recently. And then there's also the option with that button to list the sources to show all the sources in the project. We can also search in here. So for example, if we had lots of sources and we couldn't find Lynn's, we could start typing Lynn and it would show us that result. It also shows us who brought that into the project. So that was me, and what date, so the 18th, and what time. It also has a percentage here, and this shows the percentage coding. So how much of the source we've assigned to at least one theme. And I'll show you that a little bit later when we've done a little bit more coding. So I'm going to load Lynn's source here. And what we're going to do is put in some of the metadata that we have. So we're going to put in some properties for this source. So at the moment we've brought in Lynn's transcript, so what she said in the interview, but we actually have a lot more data about Lynn that's not in the project yet. And we're going to define that as the source properties. So to do that, we switch from this tab here, the text tab, to the source properties tab. And this is the source properties tab for Lynn. So these are the source properties for Lynn's source. And at the moment, there's nothing here. So it's empty at the moment. We've not created any properties. And as I said before, these properties can be anything. So these may be numeric, they may be text, they may be discrete data, they can be absolutely anything that you have available. And we're going to put in some basic demographic data here. So we're going to use the plus button here. It says quickly add a new property. So we'll add a new property and we'll call this gender. And the value will be female. So the property is, for example, basically the kind of the category data that you want to have here. And the value, that's the response for the individual. So property is gender, the value is female. But another value might be male. But for Lynn, the value is female. So we'll click OK. And you can see that that's been created. So now we have a new property, which actually goes across all of the different sources. So all of the source properties now have a property called gender. And Lynn's source has a value called female. So let's create one more property here. And we're going to call this role. So this is a kind of non-standard one, but it's very important for our project. We'll call this mother. What I mean here is the role of the family. So who is this person within the family unit? And that's what we're going to be analyzing. And this person is the mother. Now, having created these two source properties, I'm actually going to click on a different tab. I'm going to click on Simon's tab. And you'll see that for Simon, we see here the title is Simon, and we can edit this here. So we could say Simon the father. And we've got this source property, this category here for gender, but it says no values associated. Okay, so we didn't tell QUIRKOS what Simon's gender was. And we can use this drop-down box here to either select a value that we already have. So we could say female because we've already typed that out, but we would need to create a new value here for male, and then we'll click on OK. And so we have here gender equals male. And we can do the same for role. So it says no values associated here. We can choose a drop-down box and we can very easily make Simon also the mother, but that's not right. So we'll click on the X button here and we can remove that property. And then we'll create a new value, which is father. So that person is the father in the family. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the source list here to get rid of the Lynn filter, to select Chris. Oh, okay. So I have a issue here with QUIRKOS running when I'm also streaming, so it does do this sometimes. So I'm just going to close this and open this again.
But QUIRKOS will always remember your last action, right?
Yes. So I didn't get a chance to get to that yet.
It's auto saved. So
yeah.
So now this is shown.
Yeah. Yeah, I have this problem come up when I'm streaming sometimes. I think because it's keeping the computer very busy. Right, so there's our smartphone project.
Yep. And that is really helpful. I mean, anything can happen anytime.
Yes,
so
as it always does. Great. So okay. So now I'll go back and talk about that. So I didn't click save ever on that project, but actually all the work that we've done is still there, even those values that we put in there. There's no save button because QUIRKOS is constantly saving. So it's not just an auto save feature, it's a constant save feature. And what that means is that every time you do an action, so if I removed that value there, it's been saved. So if QUIRKOS crashes, your computer crashes, or you're working online and you lose the connection to the servers, happen there, then you don't, no data is lost. Right, so I was just going to the Chris's source here. So Chris here, so Chris is male. He's the son of the family. So I can very easily select the male category here. And for the role, we need to create a new one, which is the child. So they're one of the children in the family. So the reason that we've entered this data, there's no reason that we have to enter the data at the start. We can do this at absolutely any time, is that we can use these properties to filter the data later on. So if we want to see the results just from the men in the project, we can do that. And the role is going to be very interesting. So if we want to see how the parents are talking about this versus the children, then we can do that as well. In fact, let's do something that will help us with that. There's another button here, which is called Properties and Values Editor. We use this plus button here to very quickly create a new property. The Properties and Values Editor gives you a lot more control over the source properties and working with them. So we have this category here, which is role. And by default, the properties you create in QUIRKOS can only have a single answer. And that makes sense most of the time. So the gender in this case, we're only going to define people as being male or female in this case. We could do something else, but that's what we're going to do here. And the role also, someone can only have one role. But now I'm going to turn on the multiple choice category here. And that means that you can have multiple options for this value. So somebody could be a mother and a child. So that would make sense, for example, if they were a grandmother. If we would interview the grandmother. So if we had 3 generations here, we could talk to a grandmother, a mother, and a child. So a mother would be a child to their grandmother, and they would also be a mother to their own child. But the other value that I want to add here with this add value button here is parent. Oops. So now we've got this option here for parent. And you'll see here within this view that you can edit these. So you can retype them. You can remove any of these values with a click here. You can also choose whether they're displayed in alphabetical order or not. You can also remove the properties here if you don't want to have gender or role here anymore. So I'm going to close this now. And there's a little infinity symbol. Again, on the stream, you might not be able to see that, which dignifies that the role you can now have multiple choices for. And so if I go to to Lynn, so Lynn is the mother. So she's a mother and she's also a parent. Okay, so she can be a mother and a parent. Now, why would I want to distinguish that? Well, the reason is that it's interesting to see what the mothers in the project might be saying. But what if I want to see what the parents are saying? So the mothers and the fathers together. Well, I actually can do that in the queries because I can add different things together. But I just wanted to give you an example of where you might have multiple categories here. So again, so the mother is a parent. And if we go back to Simon's source here, so remember Simon is the father, he's also a parent. And so in the future, I could look to see what parents are saying, so mothers and fathers together, and also just what fathers are saying, or just what mothers are saying. So the source properties are very powerful in this respect. There's just one other thing, a couple of other things that I want to show about the source properties before we move on to something a little bit more interesting. If I choose the smartphone article here, so this, if you remember, this is a peer-reviewed article that we've imported. And I'm going to show you tomorrow how useful it is to be able to have sources of data as well as your literature in the same project at the same time. But these categories we have here for gender and role, they don't really apply very well to a journal article. A journal article doesn't have a gender, a journal article doesn't have a role really. It doesn't really make sense. So we can create some properties. I'm just going to give you an example of some of the properties that you would create if you were trying to do a literature review here. So a property might be author. And the value, oh, this is really bad. I can't remember what the author's name is. Let's say it's Smith. I have to tab back and see who's the author of this. Johnson and Hertlin. So we can have multiple authors here. So if I change that to be author to be multiple choice, so we'll remove Smith. So we had Johnson, and then the other author was Hertlin. Okay, so now we've got the authors. So we'll probably have another one for year. Pretty sure that was 2018. We'll have another one for journal. That's qualitative report. Oops. So now you'll see that even for Simon's tab, we have these categories for author, year, and journal, and it says no values associated. Well, they're not relevant here, so we don't need to fill that in. But if we had lots of different articles which we brought into this project, then we'd be able to distinguish them by what journal they were in, what author. But we can use these source properties in lots of different ways. So you can also use these for comments at the source level. So we can say this is an important article in the field. So there's no limit to the length of these. And as I said, they can be numeric, they can be text categories as well. So it's up to you to use these however you like in a kind of flexible and creative way. Okay, so you'll see the last thing I'll show you here is there's a little graph button here at the top right. This gives you a graph of the source properties. So for example, here we can see quickly by mail that we have twice as many men, i.e. 2, as we do women in the project. And we can also see that one of them is not defined, and that's our journal article there. So you can get a quick kind of overview of your data in this way. And you can just click on the grid button here to go back to the source properties. Source properties are represented by that grid. Or you can click on the X button. Now we can go back to the tab for the text. Now we're going to start looking at some of the other ways. We're going to start doing a little bit of coding and starting to read and analyze the data. So let's imagine now that we've brought in the sources of text that we want to work with. We can bring in more at any time. So we don't have to bring them all to start with. There's no limit to when you can bring in the project source files. You can keep adding them as you go along if you're getting your transcripts coming in or you've got new sources of data. Now, the next thing we're going to do is start looking at the codes and the themes. So this is the kind of the second main kind of part of using QUIRKOS. So the codes and themes, if you remember back from talking about these before, these are the things of interest that we want to explore in the data. And I'm going to start here by getting Lynn source up because I think that's the most interesting. And we're going to create some themes as we go along. So what I'm doing here is pretty much what you might describe as grounded theory. So I don't have a framework that I've created here of codes that I already know what I want to code to. I'm going to create new themes as we go along. So we're going to read the text together and then we're going to see what different themes that we could identify. So here's the first sentence. I feel that life with cell phones has made my job as a parent much harder. Okay, so that's an interesting quote already. I really want to have that logged somewhere. So I'm going to create a new theme, which I'm going to call role of parent, what parent does. And I did that by clicking on this plus button here at the top right of the Canvas window. And that brings up this Quirk properties dialog and allows you to define the title. So the title for this code is role of parent. I've got the description here, which I can use. If it's not clear from the title what I mean by role of parent, I can put something longer in here. So a description might be what parents consider their job to be as parents. So how do they define being a parent, I guess? That's probably a better way to describe it, but that's fine for now. The next option here is the color. So you can click on this and choose any color. So there are 16.8 million colors in QUIRKOS to choose from. And that seems strange and a bit excessive, but it is very useful to be able to choose a lot of different colors, because you can have, for example, if you've got lots of things which are about parenthood, you might have them all as different shades of green. And that way it becomes very quick for you to see the extracts of text and also the codes and themes which are on that kind of those related topics. You can change the colors at any time if you're going to do that. I'm going to keep this kind of green color for role of parent. And there's a groups option here, which we're going to look at tomorrow. So I'm going to click on the save button here, and you'll see it flashes a little when the new code has been created, so you can see which one it is. And we've got this role of parent bubble here. And now we can click and drag and move this around the screen. So this whole area here that's highlighted in gray when you click and drag the theme shows you where you can place the theme. And the advantage of this is you can start moving them around and putting things kind of close together. For me, when you start to have dozens or hundreds of codes, it really helps knowing, it helps me kind of remember where they are if they're in a particular location. So I've created this theme for role of parent. Now I'm going to select this piece of text and drag it and drop it onto the role of parent code. And now we've done that, what we can see is if we click out of that, we've got this color-coded stripe here in the column to the side of the text that shows us that that section of text is coded to be role of parent. And that section of text is now also highlighted in green. So we can see that this section of text is role of parent. And hovering the mouse over this column here will show us, if we can't remember what that color represents, the name of that code, role of parent. So this piece of text is now associated with the role of parent thing. So if we keep reading, it's become a constant battle with my son to get him off the phone and doing something else, or going outside, or even just interacting with me. It's such a waste of energy because we fight about it and then he's angry with me all day. So we don't get any good time together, even when he gets off the stupid phone. So we might say, this next sentence also represents the role, something about how they conceive their role of parent. They think that they need to discipline their son, they need to encourage them to go outside and to interact with people and not spend too much time on the phone. So let's add that piece of text onto the bubble as well. And now you see that that's got bigger. So because we've added more text to it, it's now grown in size. And so the more text we add to our bubbles, the more they'll grow. Now you'll see that there's two strips for these two sections that we've added here, both on the role of the parent. But I would say that this section of text is about some other things as well. So it's become a constant battle with my son to get him off the phone. So I think this is about conflict. I think this is about troubles. This is about difficulties. So I'm going to code this to be about conflict. So I'm going to create a new code here with the plus button called conflict. When confrontation happens. Sorry, I'm not very good at typing and speaking. And I'm going to make this red. So we've got a new bubble here called conflict. I can move it around here. And I can select this text and drag and drop it onto the conflict bubble. So now this section of text you'll see with the stripes has been coded to two different things. So it's been coded to conflict. It's also been coded as role of parent. So we can assign one piece of text in QUIRKOS to any number of codes. In fact, I might add it to something else. So I might add this to, I'll create a new theme actually, I think, which is called playing outside. And I can create a new theme from a section of text that I already have by dragging and dropping text just onto the plus button. So if I need to create a new theme for the text that I have, I drag and drop that onto the plus button. It creates a new bubble in a random place. I'll call this playing outside. Keep that as blue. And now that section of text you can see has also been added to playing outside. So this one sentence, we've actually coded three different things: playing outside, conflict, and the role of the parent. So this is a very basic kind of descriptive coding that we're doing here. We're already finding lots of interesting things being said. So let's keep reading. It's such a waste of energy because we fight about it, and then he's angry with me all day. So we don't get any good time together, even when he gets off the stupid phone. So this section here, I think this is also about conflict. So I can add this to conflict. I think this is also about something which I think is going to be an important theme. It's tiring. This is a waste of energy. So I'll drag and drop this onto the plus bubble and create a new theme called tiring. That's a common theme, I think, in parenthood. So we've got that theme now as well. We don't get any good time together, even when he gets off the stupid phone. So I'm going to call this frustration. So you can see now the process encoding this type of qualitative data is going through and categorizing it. So we're reading it. So when we're reading it, we are interpreting it in different ways. We're interpreting it about being about the role of the parent, about showing conflict, about playing outside, and all these different things which are going to be interesting to our research question, which is talking about smartphone addiction and how it impacts the family. And what we can do is, if we double click on any of these themes now, so if we double click on role of parent, it shows us all the text that we've assigned to the role of parent theme. So here are the two quotes that we have. I feel that life with cell phones has made my job as parent much harder. It's become a constant battle with my son to get him off the phone and doing something else or going outside. So these are the two quotes that we have, and they're both actually just from the same source, from Lynn. But you can see here we've got these ... buttons. So these will allow us to load more of the source around it. So if we want to see more of the context, want to see the whole paragraph where we've only loaded the theme, we can do that here. We can also code in here as well. So if we wanted to drag some text, say, so this is also about the role of parent is to have some good time together, we can drag and drop onto that theme here. And when we've done looking at everything which is under the role of parent theme, we can click on the home button, and that takes us back to this main view here. So wherever you are, if you ever get stuck, this home button will always take you back to the main view. So that's a good tip to bear in mind. Now, what I've got here is a section of code, series of codes, which are basically not in any kind of order and don't have any structure to them. But I might want to try and start putting some of these things together. So I'm going to create a new theme now, which is called Negative Aspects. It's not a very good theme name, but it'll do for now. And again, I'm going to give this some kind of angry red color. So this theme for negative aspects, I could use to start grouping some of these things together. So I have this theme here, frustration, we've got tiring, and we've got conflict. So these are all kind of pretty negative impacts. And I want to keep these all together as subcategories of negative impact. These are all types of negative aspect. And what I can do with these is actually drag and drop bubbles on top of each other to create hierarchies or groups of codes. So if I drag and drop the conflict bubble onto negative aspect, you can see we've got that as a subcategory there. And if I do this again with tiring, again, we've got another one there. So we can keep dragging and dropping codes onto each other. So now we've got a parent code here, which is called negative aspect, and we've got subcategories under it. So child codes, which are conflict, tiring, and frustration. Now, if I double click on the negative aspect bubble, it will show me a list of all of the things and all of the quotes about all our negative aspects. So now we have all these things together. So we've got frustration, we've got conflict, we've got another conflict here, we've also got tiring. So all of these things have come together. If we click on just one of the subcategories, so if we click on frustration, we'll just see the quotes which are about frustration. If we click on negative aspect, we've not coded anything to the top level code, negative aspect, but we could have done. And if we click for a second time, we'll undo that selection, and then we'll see everything which is listed under there. Okay, so I'm going to click the home button again. So it's very easy to create these groups, and these can start bringing your thoughts together, creating categories, which help you kind of think through what's coming out of the data. and also keep things kind of neat and tidy. Now we can also pull the bubbles off by just putting the mouse on them, putting them out like this. So we can undo and redo any of these at any time and change our mind. If we want to code to one of the subcategories, so for example, this section of text here, everyone has their phones back, they're secretly checking them in their lap, so they're frustrated here. So we drag and drop this onto the top level, and then the subcategories pop out, and then we can drag it onto the frustration bubble. So that's how we work with those subcategories. Now at the moment we've only coded from Lynn's source, so let's look at Simon the father, see if there's anything here. Oh wait, sorry, that's the son. I think we've coded these the wrong way around. Is Chris the father? Yep, sorry, Chris is the father there. So we've got those the wrong way around. Let's just change that. And we'll go back and change Simon. That's because I put in Simon the father there, wasn't it? And here's the child. Okay. Great, so we'll go to Chris's source. So Chris is the dad. My wife started having no phone rule at the table. I support that. So maybe this is about the role of parent. It's nice to have a conversation together with family without a lot of interruptions, or at least those caused by the smartphones. Again, maybe that's about the role of parent, but maybe this is about a new theme. Say, this is probably about, I'm going to call this family togetherness. But anyway, if we start looking at the role of parent theme now by double clicking on it, you'll see we've got quotes here from Chris and quotes from Lynn. So now we're starting to do coding across all the different sources that we have in the project. Now, really the last kind of thing I'm going to show today is some of the other ways to look through the data and also to do the memos. So the first thing I'll show you is this memo column here. I'm going to go back to Lynn's source. There's a button here which is for memos. And as I described kind of briefly earlier, the memos can be used to annotate the text. So to put in your own kind of thoughts, comments, or to do something else like in vivo coding, where you use the words of the participant to suggest the themes or topics that are emerging from the data. So for example, if I was doing in vivo coding, I would select this sentence here: it's become a constant battle with my son to get him off the phone. So I would select this section here: it's become a constant battle with my son. I drag and drop that not onto the code, but onto the memo column. And that creates a new memo, and we'll call this constant battle, because that's a very evocative phrase. And here, this, you can hear the desperation. Even just interacting with me. But we also want to might say something like, here sounds like she is really angry with phones. So for some approaches to grounded theory and for doing, as I said, IPA or in vivo coding, line by line coding, you might go through and you might create a memo, a note like this for every line of the text. And then you might go back later when you've done this as a first read through and code those memos. So what you can do is you can click on a memo, you can drag and drop that text. For example, here, it would be good to put it on an angry bubble. We've got frustration, so it's already there. But by clicking on the memo, it shows you the text that that's referring to. You see it gets highlighted there. And then you can select that text and drag and drop it onto another code there. So the memos are another way that you can do that. And anytime that you can see a quote from the data, so if we double click on the role of parent again, we'll see when we have the memo column open here, we can see the memos attached to that text. So they're always kept together with that text in any of the views and any of the results. Now we can toggle the memo column here with this little button. We can still see the little icon here showing us that there are memos here and where they are. And if we either double click on the icon or press the memo button here, the memo column opens and closes. As I showed you earlier in the settings button here, you can make the memos column a bit bigger. So if you're doing a lot of memos and you want to have more space to do that, you can do it that way. Okay. So this is the phase where most people will go off and they would just keep going through reading the data. It will probably take days and days to go through it. I hope you can see, even with this one paragraph here, we managed to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I remember we did this in Sarawak last year. I think the same paragraph, some people managed to get 10, 12, 15 different themes or topics. And I think it's a good illustration of how in-depth qualitative analysis can be, how time-consuming it can be, but also hopefully how interesting and fun it can be. I don't know, Harim is always talking about bringing your data to life. It's a great concept for of doing that. But it becomes now a very long process of going through reading and coding until you're happy that you've kind of covered all the important things in your data. And just as a last thing today, I'm just going to show you one more tool which will help you look for specific things in the data. And that's the keyword search. So you'll see next to the memo button here, there's a magnifying glass. And if I click on that, it pops up with this screen here, which we can use to search for particular words. So I'm going to search for the word phone, and it's going to pop up here. Now, so it's showing across all the sources. So there's from Chris, there's from Simon, and there's also from the smartphone article, telephone, smartphone, all the different times that the word phone appears. And I might use that to do some coding. So for example, I can hide this search bar here, click on the plus button, create a new theme for phone. So for example, if I just wanted to categorize every time somebody mentioned a phone, I can do that. I can select, I'm really sure many of my friends are using phones a lot more, my phone table. I can drag and drop that onto there. So I can code from the search results. For example, here, we want to use the plus button because I can't see all of the data. I can click and drag there. Now, the search function also allows you to search only for whole words. So for example, at the moment it's showing phone, phones, and smartphones. But if I choose whole words only, it will only show you when people just say the word phone. We could also include words in terms of endings, ed, ing, s. So that would have phones, phoned, phoning. We can also choose to refine the text only to refine the search only to text that we've already coded. So if we just wanted to look for, if we're looking for, I know there's a quote somewhere where somebody used that word, I've already coded it, then we can have it appear there. There's also a synonyms database, which unfortunately is only in English at the moment. But what this does is allow you to choose other alternative words. So phone, and then we've also got telephone. We've also got call. So there's different meanings of the word phone. It doesn't necessarily just mean the physical object. It also means to phone someone, to call someone, to ring someone. So you can choose which of those are relevant, and then you can add those as well. So if we search for call and ring, I'm sure we're going to get something coming up there as well. Yeah. Oh, call, radically, and monitor, ring. So we wanted to have a whole words option for the synonyms as well. But this can really help us kind of go through and find the alternative words that people have used. Now, my caveat with this is that you can't really use this as a shortcut to reading the data in depth. If, for example, even you wanted to search for the word phone, it may be that somebody used another word for phone that you didn't think of, like call or ring, or they may have used a different language, or they may have used slang for it, and then you'll miss that, and then your data is incomplete. So although if you're looking for very specific things, it's especially useful, I think, for places and particular people. If you want mentions of any time somebody mentioned Sarawak or Edinburgh or something like that, then you can do that. But remember, they might say, oh, my hometown, and then you won't spot it. So be a little bit wary when trying to rely too much on the search function, but it is there to help out. So today, as a brief summary, what we've done is we've brought in the sources of text data. We have described source properties for them. And we've also created some codes. We've created some groups of codes, and we've created some memos, and we've done some coding, and we've coded sections of text onto the data. We've also double-clicked on codes to review what text we have stored under them, so we can see everything under a particular source. What we're going to focus on tomorrow is basically the functions that we do once we've been through and done a lot of coding. We'll look at a couple of other tools that help with the coding process, but we'll also mostly look at ways of categorizing data, querying the data, looking at different subsets of the data, and also generating different reports and outputs. And then finally, we'll look at some of the collaboration features and how they can be useful. And we'll also have lots of time for questions. So it's a good time if you're able over the next day or so to play around with QUIRKOS a little bit. And then if you've got any questions for the start of the session tomorrow, then hopefully we can help out with that. Harim, is that all right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. I think that is a very good session to introduce qualitative data analysis and the use of QUIRKOS. There are a few questions for you, Daniel.
Great.
So I will just read it out for the benefit of others.
Great.
So let me scroll down. Okay. The first question by Zaiton. Does everyone have the access to live collaboration, or just those involved in the project?
So it's just those involved in the project. So I'll show you this tomorrow. But basically, you create a project, and obviously it's private by default, so it's not shared with anyone.
Okay.
And there's an interface where you will log in and show your projects. And what you can do is choose who you want to share it with. So you just need to know the email address of the person who's also using QUIRKOS, and then you can invite them to share the project. You also have the option, you can let them only look at it, but not edit the project, or you can let them read and write the project.
Okay.
But it's a good question, but we're going to cover some of that tomorrow.
But you also mentioned just now, if you collaborate with others, you can convert the project into a Word file, Excel file, send to someone else in case he or she does not have the software. But at least they can still look into the data, and see what has been done.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, yeah, it's a really good question. Tomorrow we're going to show all the different ways that you can share with people, even if they are not using QUIRKOS.
Okay. Well, the next question is from Fitri. If we use the cloud to share documents, do our collaboration need a QUIRKOS account as well to work on the same data files?
Yes, that's true. So everybody that you want to collaborate with on the software needs to have a QUIRKOS account cloud. But that's only for the live collaboration. So you can download if you've created a project in QUIRKOS Cloud, you can download it, and then you can send that file to someone who is using QUIRKOS offline.
Yeah.
It means they can't work on the file at the same time as you.
Right.
So you have to merge any changes they make back. But you can do that. So you can work with someone who's offline. And also, as you said, Harim, you can also share that project in different ways, like with the Word export and the reports and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Another question. Based on your experience, would you advise to do a single bubble coding parallel with the group bubble coding for all the data? Or is it best to finish all the single bubble coding and then move on to the group bubble coding?
Oh, it's a really good question. It's a really good question. I don't think it has a good answer.
Right.
Okay, so I think, I mean, Harim, I'd be interested in your take on this as well. I mean, for me, I think it's something that a lot of people disagree with. So I've read articles, especially textbooks, that don't want you to start grouping too early, because they feel that when you start grouping, you're starting to, in your own head, limit how you think about the data. You're setting those things in concrete very, very early. I mean, I would say that in QUIRKOS, it's so easy to change your mind and pull these bubbles out and undo the grouping.
Right.
I do tend to start with single codes like this quite a lot, except when there are certain things which are very obvious going to be subcategories and I need to pull out.
Yeah.
I can show you a very quick example of that. So this is another one of the example projects that we have. And we have, this is about politics basically in Scotland. And one of the categories that I always had as a group is people are talking about the different political parties, right? So I'm always going to want to be able to distinguish what people say about the different parties.
Right.
But I always want to keep them together. So at the very start, I had a group for all the different political parties. And for me, that was an example of a group, a categorization that exists naturally, if that makes sense. So I'm not forcing my data into an artificial group or category there. But if you had something else like, so for here, I have more abstract things like Scottish identity. And I've started to group that together with Scotland. But maybe that doesn't make sense for people who don't live in Scotland. They may feel they have a Scottish identity because they really like Scottish food or drink or something. So I've actually, backed myself into a corner in a certain extent by grouping in that way.
Right.
So there is a risk to creating that group. I mean, again, Harim, you're probably more experienced in this.
No. I mean,
do you have an opinion here?
Yeah,
it's a controversial debate.
I mean, I have no answer to that question, but two things that I usually do. Number one, as Daniel pointed out earlier, you have to do you have to know your strategy, your tactics before using the software. So before using the software, I would, go through the script first, understand the context. That would, help me to have a better idea what I should do with the software. So I guess that is what Daniel pointed out earlier, the QDA process, 5 stages or something like that. That is very, very important. Don't over rely on the software because we are still the researcher. So make sure we know the text, we know the research, and we utilize the software to work for us. Number 2, and this is what I like the software, and that is I never get the first draft correct. I will never get the first round of analysis of coding correct. So the good thing about the software is you can redo, you can undo, you can delete, you can. So whether you start with single or group, the more you read, the more you understand your project, the text, the more likely you will change things. But that is something that we have to go through. Eventually, we really have something that that reflects the real situation. Yep, that will be my take.
Yeah,
okay.
No, I totally agree. Absolutely. Yeah, don't be afraid to change your mind. That's probably the most important thing. Yeah.
Correct. Okay. All right. Next question. From the synonym tool, okay, which you just showed us, is it possible to add our own words to the list? Say the interview captured a multilingual input and we want to code the words have similar meanings. Is it possible to do that?
No, I'm afraid it's not. No, it's a very good point. It's a feature a lot of people have requested, so we want to add that in the future. But yeah, you can't add your own things to the Synonyms database, and it will be very useful when people are using abbreviations and things like that as well. If you could quickly search for those. So a lot of people, yeah, it would be a really good feature, but it's not possible, I'm afraid, in QUIRKOS.
Okay. All right. Well, again, the good thing is we can always provide feedback to Daniel.
Yeah, that's why I love doing these sessions. I always get so many good ideas and suggestions.
I mean that's why we want to have you here, because when we use the software, then we know the person behind the software. We can provide feedback directly. But of course, we also understand that QUIRKOS is purposely made to make it simple for people to learn and to use. I totally agree that we may spend hours learning what to click, learning the software before actually doing coding and analysis. And that is, that is a big thing. All right. So we'll see how it goes, because Daniel has a team to decide. Okay, is there any more question from the participants? Because on the list, that will be the last question. Okay, thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much. We are looking forward to hearing from you again tomorrow.
Yeah, really looking forward to it.
So we are thankful the participants are here with us today, and we hope to see you tomorrow.